20,000 years before anyone invented the wheel, before writing, before farming, before pretty much every human achievement you learned about in school, our ancestors did something far stranger. They looked at one of the most dangerous predators on the planet, a pack hunter with bone-crushing jaws, and they let it sleep next to their children. That predator was the wolf. And somehow, over generations, it turned into the golden retriever sleeping on your couch right now. This matters because it's the first time humans ever bent another species to our will, long before we grew a single crop or built a single house. And the strangest part, nobody planned it. Nobody sat down and said, let's invent the dog. So how did this actually happen? Stick around, because the real answer involves garbage dumps, natural selection working in fast forward, and a genetic accident that basically hacked the wolf's brain. Let's get into it. Before we talk about how wolves became dogs, we need to understand what a wolf actually is. In theory, a wolf is just a big, dangerous dog. In practice, a wolf is a highly organized, deeply territorial predator that survives by taking down animals way bigger than itself, working as a team, and treating anything unfamiliar as either a threat or a meal. This is not an animal that wants to be your friend. Wolves are cautious. Wolves are suspicious. Wolves, generally speaking, avoid humans the same way you'd avoid a guy screaming at a bus stop. So here's the question that should be bugging you already. If wolves are wired to avoid humans, how did we end up with pugs wearing sweaters? The answer isn't that humans tamed wild wolves one by one like some Ice Age dog whisperer situation. That's not how it worked at all. The real story is way weirder, and it starts with trash. Around 15 to 40,000 years ago, depending on which researchers you ask, early humans were living in semi-permanent camps. And where humans camp, humans leave scraps, bones, fat, leftover meat, the stuff nobody wanted. This sounds boring. It isn't, because a pile of food scraps sitting outside a human camp is basically a free buffet with a no effort required sign on it. Now, most wolves looked at that buffet and thought, too risky, humans are dangerous, I'm out. Fear kept them away. But here's where it gets interesting. Not every wolf reacted the same way. In any wild population, there's natural variation in temperament. Some individuals are jumpy and paranoid. Others are a little bolder, a little more curious, a little less freaked out by nearby humans. Those slightly bolder, slightly calmer wolves started sneaking toward the scrap piles at night. And because free calories mean better survival odds, those bolder wolves ate more, stayed healthier, and had more pups. Meanwhile, the extra anxious wolves stayed away from humans entirely, missed out on the easy food, and didn't do quite as well. This is natural selection, but it's not selecting for speed or strength. It's selecting for something much simpler, staying calm around people. Scientists actually have a name for this idea. It's called the survival of the friendliest hypothesis, and there's a famous experiment that backs it up in a shocking way. In the 1950s in Russia, a scientist named Dmitry Belyaev ran a long-term study on foxes, not wolves, but the logic transfers perfectly. He took wild foxes and, in each generation, only bred the calmest, least fearful individuals around humans. That's it. He wasn't selected for cuteness. He wasn't selected for floppy ears or a wagging tail. Just calmness. Within a few generations, something bizarre happened. The foxes didn't just act friendlier. They started looking different. Floppy ears showed up, curly tails appeared, fur got patchy with random white spots. Some had shorter snouts. None of that was intentionally bred for. It came along for the ride. This tells us something huge. Tameness isn't just a personality trait sitting off in its own corner. It's tangled up, biologically, with a bunch of physical traits that make an animal look, for lack of a better word, cuter and more juvenile. Which means when early wolves were being selected purely for calmness around humans, they were probably also drifting generation by generation toward floppier ears, shorter snouts, and that unmistakable puppy dog face. Nobody was breeding for adorableness. Adorable was just the side effect of removing fear. You might be wondering how something as complicated as fearlessness could be tied to physical features like ear shape. Here's the simplified version, because the full biology gets messy fast. A lot of these traits, calm temperament, floppy ears, patchy coloring, are influenced by something called neural crest cells. These are cells that show up incredibly early in embryonic development, and they go on to build a surprising number of different body parts, including parts of the skull, the pigment cells and fur, and pieces of the adrenal system that controls the body's stress response. So, if you tweak how these neural crest cells develop, even slightly, you can accidentally affect an animal's stress hormones and its physical appearance at the same time. That's the shortcut nature took. Select for calm behavior, and you're quietly also selecting for physical changes because they share the same genetic starting point early in development. This is one of those facts that sounds like a minor biology detail, but is actually the secret hinge the entire domestication story swings on. Okay, so now we've got a population of wolves hanging around human camps that are noticeably calmer than typical wild wolves. This is not yet a dog. This is just a bolder wolf with better tolerance for humans. So what pushes things further? Mutual benefit. Once these camp-following wolves were sticking around consistently, humans probably started noticing something useful. Wolves have incredible senses of smell and hearing. They can detect approaching predators or rival groups long before a human would notice. In exchange for leftover food and relative safety, these wolves may have acted like an early warning system. You know the type, the neighbor's dog that loses its mind the second a stranger walks by. That instinct is ancient. It's the same instinct that would have alerted an Ice Age camp that something was approaching in the dark. Over time, humans likely started actively encouraging the calmer, more useful wolves to stick around, maybe tossing them extra food, maybe tolerating pups born near camp instead of chasing them off. This is the shift from wolves merely tolerating humans to humans actively favoring certain wolves. And once humans start making choices about which animals get to stick around and breed, you've officially entered the territory of domestication. It's no longer just wild selection. It's a selection with a very early, very informal human hand guiding it. This all sounds like a nice theory, but is there actual evidence? Yes, and it's some of the most touching archaeology out there. In Germany, at a site called Bonn-Oberkassel, archaeologists found a grave from around 14,000 years ago containing two humans and a dog buried together deliberately, not a wild animal that wandered into a pit. A dog intentionally placed with people who clearly cared about it enough to bury it with them. That's not something you do with a random forest predator. That's something you do with a companion. Similarly, in Belgium, researchers found the remains of a canine from over 30,000 years ago that had a shortened snout and different tooth proportions than wild wolves of that era, suggesting the split between wolves and early dog-like animals started way earlier than most people assume. Genetic studies back this up too. When scientists compare the DNA of modern wolves and modern dogs, the math points to a split somewhere between 20 and 40,000 years ago. That's a huge range. And researchers are still arguing about the exact number, but here's the important part. That split happened well before humans invented farming. Dogs weren't a byproduct of agriculture. Dogs came first. We were still hunter-gatherers when this relationship started, which honestly makes it more impressive, not less. Here's a plot twist that even researchers are still fighting about. Did domestication happen once, in one location, with one population of wolves and then spread everywhere? Or did it happen multiple times independently in different regions with different groups of ancient wolves getting cozy with different groups of ancient humans? For a while, the popular theory was a single origin somewhere in Eurasia. But newer genetic evidence has made things murkier, hinting that there might have been at least two separate domestication events, one in the east and one in the west, that later mixed together as humans and their dogs migrated and interbred with other dog populations. This sounds like a small detail, but it's a big deal, because it tells us domestication wasn't a one-time miracle. It might have been a repeatable pattern, something that happened whenever wolves and humans overlapped long enough under the right conditions. Which raises an interesting thought. Maybe dogs weren't a fluke. Maybe they were basically inevitable. One more question worth answering. Why wolves? Why not foxes or bears or some other clever predator hanging around ancient campsites? Part of the answer is social structure. Wolves live in cooperative family groups with built-in hierarchy, communication, and teamwork. That social wiring, originally built for coordinating hunts and raising pups together, turned out to be shockingly easy to redirect toward humans instead of other wolves. A dog treating you like the leader of its pack isn't some cute coincidence. It's ancient wolf social software running on new hardware, with you standing in for the alpha. Other animals simply don't have that built-in framework, which is part of why domestication attempts with other predators haven't produced anything close to the dog's level of bonding with humans. So back to that opening question. How did humans convince wolves to become pets? The honest answer is we didn't convince anyone of anything. We didn't tame wolves through patience or bravery or some Ice Age training montage. What actually happened is that a slightly braver, slightly calmer type of wolf noticed our garbage, decided the risk was worth it, and outsurvived its more anxious relatives. Fear got filtered out, generation after generation, and cuteness came along as a strange, unplanned bonus. The dog sitting next to you today is basically the descendant of the calmest, boldest wolf in an Ice Age dumpster diving contest. And if that doesn't make you appreciate your dog a little more, I don't know what will, which actually leads to an even weirder question. Because wolves weren't the only wild animal humans reshaped without really trying. There's an even stranger case involving a small, unassuming grain crop that changed human history so completely that some scientists argue it domesticated us right back